So yeah, I graduated from Cogswell, actually very recently, in December, technically. When I took my job at Crystal 2 years ago, I had 6 classes left at Cogswell that I slowly took over the past 2 years. And so I've been an environment arts there, which is super fun, crazy. And there's, we shipped Tomb Raider in like a week or like a month before I graduated. So I shipped again and graduated in the same month, which is not recommended, but it worked out in the end. And before that, I was an intern and contract artist at Massive Black, which is like an art house from May 2013 to January 2014. And then the year before that, I took my first 3D modeling class at Cogswell, which is my summer 2012 semester. And then before that, I started at Cogswell in fall 2011. So my general advice from talking to students, I've done like recruiting events for work, and I've done like lots of stuff like online with like Polycount and community stuff. This is like my general like preach to like how I succeeded at Cogswell. And this doesn't mean it worked for everybody, but this is what worked for me, and my advice to you. The big thing is be a better student. And that doesn't necessarily mean grades. Just grades are what come out of you being a student, but it has more. If you want to be like an artist or a creative type, there's more than just grades. It's your work. It's the quality of your work. I didn't really ever care about grades ever in any of my art classes. If I got a project, I almost always tried to do it beyond the scope that was asked, for better or for worse. Sometimes you end up with more work than you can handle, but I think for me that helped me push myself like with every project, and every project the goal was to get better. And then along with that is every class you take, learn everything you can from it, even if it's a class you think will not help you. Like I took a script writing class and like capstone, which I think a lot of people would write those classes off pretty quickly because they're not like core to like, oh, I want to be a 3D artist or a designer. But those can, if you really focus on them and use, almost all the classes at Cogswell are fairly open-ended, and you can kind of like do a project that's related to what you want to study. Like if you're doing creative writing, you can try to write like a script for a game, or if you're doing script writing or whatever. And if you're doing like capstone, don't do like a capstone project on just like something that has nothing to do with your job that you want to get. My capstone project was on color theory, and so I spent a lot of time researching that. So I would highly recommend picking a capstone project, like something that can help you out, do work that's related to what you want to do. Most classes in Cogswell are pretty open-ended, and you can kind of get the class to at least have some type of positive outcome, even if it's a really boring class at first. And then the other thing that I've heard a lot is like 3D artists will be like, oh, I don't need to learn this 2D stuff because I just want to work in 3D, but that's not, like the fundamentals are extremely important. Being able to draw, understand composition, color, value, structures, contrast, perspective, all that stuff, the basics. You never stop learning them. And they're incredibly important. You're not going to be hired as a 3D artist, you're going to be hired as an artist, and that encompasses all that stuff. You have to understand the final image on the screen, not just how to make a single asset in the screen. And that goes for designers as well. All that stuff helps make better levels. How to navigate the player through the level all relates to that stuff. And there's a cliche that like takes 10,000 hours to master something. There's a lot of false stuff in there, but there is some truth to it. I've put more hours than you guys have. That's the only reason I have a job, but really, like this is one of the main factors. There's maybe some people who pick stuff up easier than others, but overall, it's literally just hours. And you take your 4 years of school, about 50 weeks a year, 6 days a week, 6 hours a day. That's like 7,200 potential hours over your 4 years that you can potentially master your craft and get a job. So then kind of related to what I was talking about, actively seeking knowledge inside and outside of your classes. This is super important. I would say that 50% of my job and what got me my job, I learned from Cogswell in my classes, and then 50% of what I learned outside my classes and the knowledge that I actively looked for outside my classes helped me too. It's not, you won't learn everything you need to know here. It's impossible. There's so much information on the internet. It's free, so go find it. Similar to what I was saying before, make every assignment your best. Don't, like, and there's some teachers in the room, but like the general education classes compared to your art classes and like balancing those, you probably don't want to take like 5 art classes in the same semester, so your overall quality of work goes down across the board. Balance your schedule with classes like government, obviously, isn't as important as your drawing classes or art classes. So kind of balance that stuff out. I think I got mostly C's in my general education classes, except for like my writing classes. My writing classes, my script writing, capstone. Like I was saying before, I really kind of make those, get the most out of them. And then there's, like I was saying, hundreds of websites on the internet. I always went to like Polycount, 3D Total, 3D Motive, E3D. Gilroad's a new one. It's kind of popped up over the past couple of years. ArtStation. There's Packed with Knowledge. Some paid for, but overall, like you can do tutorials on your own. You're not getting all the information you need from your class or want to know how to do something better. And most of those tutorials are done by industry professionals. Study professional work. Diligently find artists or designers or whoever that have a style or a career that you're interested in and figure out their process. Look at their work and figure out how you can get your work to that level. Understanding that gap is really important. There's artists in the industry, even for me, that I look up to and want to get better and want to push myself towards. And so it's like an ongoing process. There's always people out there you can try to emulate, not copy directly, but just try to get some type of knowledge from. And look at art every day and spend time looking at it. Don't just like flip through it on Facebook or like ArtStation in like 2 seconds. Actually like stare at it and just like figure out and break down the image of why you like it or why you don't like it or why it's a successful image. And that's just not just 3D art or not like kind of more modern computer art. That's everything, classic paintings, photography, old photography, new photography, everything. It's all super important. And similar to with designers, break down game design systems, take notes, draw sketches of games you play, figure out what the game is doing right, doing wrong. And that's good games and bad games. Obviously, like, you can learn a lot from bad games, actually, and figure out why they're bad. So I play them, and that's kind of a weird one. Obviously, don't play games like 40 hours a week, but do a little bit and do some research and think about them analytically. And then the most important thing, the number one thing, is your portfolio. It's the thing that you are. It's basically who you are to a company, and you have about 30 seconds to 45 seconds of time. So you spent like hours and months and maybe years on all the art in there, and someone will blow through it in about 30 to 45 seconds, which sounds terrible, but it's true. So be aware of that. There's a great write-up by John Jones. If you just type into Google, there's a link here, and we'll send out the slides, but it's an amazing write-up of your portfolio repels jobs. And he's been an art director, an outsource manager, all kinds of things in the industry for like 20 years. And it's just a write-up of all the common problems he sees with portfolios. Just overcomplicated, slow, too much work, all those things. And then kind of going off that, finding portfolios of artists that you like is really important. Artists that have at junior level or at senior level, like top elite portfolios out there. Find them, figure out like how they're working, their design, like just how easy they are to use, and try to emulate them. Keep your website simple, like super simple. You're not a web designer. Maybe you are, which you might have a different website for, but for your portfolio, it should be the least amount of clicks to see the most amount of work and the fastest amount of time. But don't use Flash, don't use any crazy animation swipes. Like I said, you have 30 to 45 seconds. So you're only good as your weakest piece is like a really common cliche you hear, but it's super true. You really only need like 3 to 6 pieces that are well done to get noticed. And as you make new ones, replace the old ones. Like if you made a gun or like a hard surface car or something a year ago, and then you've made a new hard surface model that's better, better done, better lit, everything, there's no point in having the old model in there. And then as a junior, like breaking into the industry, you will get hired off potential. Your portfolio will have very glaring issues to you. No one really likes their portfolio. I hate my portfolio. Everybody hates their portfolio. There's nothing you can do about it. But you will get hired off potential, and so putting your best work in there, and even if it's not perfect, it doesn't matter if it's showing the employer that they can turn you into a high-level employee. That's kind of how you break in. You don't need crazy elaborate projects in your portfolio. If you're working on a group project and that's in there, that's great, but like if you're on individual work, you don't need this big, giant, sprawling, like MMO size level. If you just execute like 3 or 4 just like small things really well, you'll get noticed, and it'll be easier on you. My portfolio when I got hired had fully textured and like rendered lit like car, a rock, a couple tileable textures, and like this little like marble cart scene. That's it. You don't need crazy stuff. Keep them really focused and execute something small really well. It's much better off than doing something giant, kind of mediocre. And then secondary to your portfolio is networking, super important. I can't stress this enough, is that everybody in this room, everybody you go to school with, are basically your first industry contacts. There will be people that come out of your class that succeed and find jobs quickly, maybe a year after they graduate, and you want to make sure you've left a good impression on those people and your classmates in general. Because a lot of jobs you'll get are based off recommendation. I've gotten to Cogswell when Matt hired at Crystal, and I'm working on getting 2 more. And it's huge that I worked with those people. I knew their work. They did great classwork. They were always working on projects, and I knew I could trust to recommend them. And I can't. There's certain people, if they came to me looking for a job, I wouldn't be able to recommend based on my experience with them at Cogswell. So make sure you're always aware of that. And go to meetups, conferences. There's all kinds of game jams and game meetups that a bunch of people go to, meet people. The internet also has a bunch of communities you can join, like Polycount. I met a bunch of people before I even got a job. I knew people from like Rockstar and Crytek and just a bunch of random people I met on the internet. So just go out and meet people. Always helps. GDCs every year too in San Francisco. Just be careful with the parties. They get a little crazy. So it's just kind of like the overall, just my experience as a student. Hopefully maybe that can help you guys just think about some stuff. And then so day in the life of, I guess, like just kind of working at Crystal Dynamics, like what I've learned so far. Fundamentals are super important. I can't stress this enough. It's never ending. You have to, every level we think about all the basics very early on, color composition, color theory, lighting balance, all that stuff becomes very early on. It's super important. Something really important I also learned was how to navigate an entire range of people. I think when I first got there, really bad habit of just like, I'm a very like blunt personality. I don't know. I grew up in the East Coast and I just like was very direct. And some people can handle that, some people can't. And you have to be able to navigate those people. And some people are really like open to that stuff, and some people are really easily offended. And so like you have to kind of be very, very smart and diligent about how you talk to different people from different areas. And then communication is a big thing too. I didn't really realize I was bad at it until I got there. And so like having very decisive conversations, taking good notes, which you can always practice, having very clear goals with outcomes, even just short-term goals like daily goals, weekly goals, or help just overall. Even when I work at projects at home, I have like a goal, like a spreadsheet with goals and general kind of guidelines that I want to hit. Hopefully I've learned how to make better art. I think so. Learned a ton about process and things like that. It never ends, you're always learning. Just because I have a job doesn't mean I just like stopped learning or anything. It's always an ongoing process. And then for like my career, I've been switching over to more like technical aspects of making art, into like a tech art role, kind of like focusing on like PBR materials, creation, substance designer workflow, shader creation, overall asset workflow, and technical lighting. Just the general tools that we use is an area that I'm currently kind of pushing myself towards. And that's what's awesome about like the industry. There's like a role for like everybody, whether you're more artistic or technical, which I'll go over in a little bit. And this is like the simplest like oversimplification of art in the world. But I didn't really like think about it until like my lead actually probably like it was like 3 months ago, just like wrote it out almost exactly like this. And this structure is like is how we build games. Lighting is the most important thing. If you have unsuccessful lighting, the other two areas below it will fail. It doesn't matter how amazing the material looks or the modeling is. If it's badly lit, it will fail. And as an artist, in portfolios, this is super important. Lighting is like, I kind of brushed over it when I was in school too. And this is like, lighting is the most important thing. The rest will fall into place. Like, if you ever played like a really old, like a really simple game, like an indie game, that's like super hot or like a really minimalistic game, they survive off this. They have gray materials on polygonal surfaces, but they spend a lot of time on lighting. It looks great. And similar with materials, you can save a bad model with good materials and good lighting. That structure holds true. And then modeling is the least important, really. Every game ships with really bad, janky, broken models, but hopefully they're covered in good materials with good lighting. And as a career thing, this is important to know too. If you are focusing all your time on just modeling and your entire portfolio is filled with kind of okay lit and untextured models, it's going to be hard for you to get noticed because you aren't creating as much successful art as possible. So I would highly recommend, especially when I work in the game industry, this is a little bit less true for the movies, but the game industry, it's going to be almost impossible to get a job at a game studio if you don't have textured models in your portfolio. You need to have built in textures, which is a daunting task at first, but there's millions of tutorials online, finding projects to try to texture. So texture, make awesome materials, and light them well. And then what I was mentioning before is like the technical visual range. I'm probably on the left, and then there's a guy at work who's probably the most visual artist I've ever seen in my life. He's a brilliant artist. He is incredibly talented, and he can see things that I can't. But we both have roles on the team, and so you kind of have to find your area. This goes for design as well. You guys mentioned your programming, so you'd probably be more like technical designers, and technical designers do more like do level streaming, lots of scripting, like gameplay systems and things like that. And then visual designers do more like layout, they do world building, and like for Tomb Raider, there's like lots of climbing and stuff, and they deal with a lot of that stuff. So find your role. You can fit in somewhere in the middle too, be a little bit of both. And so like my general daily routine. First thing in the morning, always check your email. Communication, it's big. It's how we survive. And then after that, we have like a morning meeting. We call it Stand Up with our pillar team. We're organized for Rise of the Tomb Raider on like the content section. So we have like a hub team, SRL team, OMS team, challenge team, and cinematic team. And each team has a group of designers, artists, animators. It's like a small development like studio within the studio, and they build that kind of themed content. So I was in the cinematics team for the last game. And you just kind of go over tasks for the day, problems, blockers, issues, and just an open communication meeting. And then almost every day, I focus on the art team's workflow. So following up with like bugs in our tools, organizing with like tech art to build improved tools, improve shaders, and just make everybody's life a little bit easier. And teaching new tools and workflows to the artists on the team as well. And then programs we use Maya, ZBrush, Substance Designer, Substance Painter, and Nald as our main asset creation tools. If anybody, has anybody used Substance Designer or Substance Painter yet? I would highly recommend it. It's where the industry is going. Photoshop is basically dead. Like, I haven't opened up Photoshop to work in like a month and a half. It's amazing. That tool like wasn't built for games. And you have a quick question?
Well, for Substance Painter, do you create your own materials, or do you use the ones that are there available?
So we use a tileable texture workflow at work. And so basically, we author an entire material library of tileable textures, and then all of our content is built with these with low res blend maps. We use R, G, and B to call a different material, and then we create detail with a secondary map called a ramp blend, which is like a detail map that kind of creates a nice transition between the materials. So we use Painter to author in our blend maps and preview what the material will look like in our engine. And for the character art team, they use Painter as like a one-to-one. Character art tends to be more one-to-one texturing maps, and they use our material library and then build their own. And sometimes there are materials available. It's like there's no negative of using their materials, as long as the final product looks good. I guess is all that matters. At the end of the day, that's what matters. Make the final product look awesome. So it's just a tool. So we use it for just to speed up the workflow. And then day-to-day work depends on where we are in the production schedule. We use a vertical slice model, which we build an entire level from start to finish in a very short amount of time. So we build like a third of our game completely, and it's like what we call like shippable quality, the best we can at that time. And so at the beginning of that, it's very like iterative, brainstorming, concepting levels, just kind of like throw everything at the wall and see what works. And then middle of productions, like kind of building the art assets, elements, modular kits, kind of getting the feel of the level. And then towards the end of production, just like polish and bug fixing and just boring kind of mindless tasks just to make it work and run, optimize it. And then just the overall art and design relationship, it's an ongoing thing. We sit near designers, like the designer is, I have 3 designers within all like arm reach of my desk basically. It's very important. We're always working with designers, artists, constant communication, never ends. And artists make the overall design better, and designers make the art better. It's just a relationship that can't be independent of each other. And then oftentimes, art will need to build like an element, a puzzle element, or like an interactable object for Laura to jump on, move, push, pull. And so there's certain constraints that design needs. Generally, like Laura has like certain metrics. So if it's a climbing object, the things she climbs on need to be a certain distance away from each other. Needs to have like a certain footprint, and have all these constraints that we need to make our art within, which is ongoing loop. We talk with designers every day about that. And then design, like I was going to mention to you guys, technical aspects of design help stream our levels together to make them run better. It's incredibly, like when you get to a big project and you're streaming levels together, if you don't stream them right, you're loading an entire level into the game that the player's not seeing. And we have to we meticulously build our levels in order we can stair step the streaming, and we have an amazing designer, just one guy, who sits every day and streams our entire game together and helps it run. So that sounds like, and it's all a lot of scripting and a lot of node connections and things like that. And then we use a system called Action Graph, which, if anybody's familiar with Unreal's blueprints, or any node-based scripting language, it's very similar to that. It holds together our entire design, and then designers know it really well and intimately. Every designer needs to know how to use Action Graph at work. So programming, if you're going to be a designer, basic programming knowledge is super important. And then for the artists, we use it for destructibles and phys objects, so are kicking around things, breaking things. And so the artists get a lot of help from designers with that stuff. And then that's basically the rundown. So if you guys have any questions, anything you want to talk about, work you want to show me, portfolios, let me know.
What languages they use in Action Graph?
It's based off C++. It's very simple. It's just basic class.
Object-oriented?
Yeah. It's
Okay.
pretty straightforward. Question?
So, what's the main differences from Substance Painter and Substance Designer? What does Substance Painter do that designer doesn't, and what does designer do that the painter doesn't?
So Substance Designer is is strictly a node-based procedural kind of content creation. We use it for creating archival textures, and then creating masks that we use either in Painter or just build the masks that we need right in there inside the nodes. And then Painter is a one-to-one texturing program that you can paint right on a model. Painter's coming out with a new update soon that is kind of bridging, it's a little more of a blurred line between the two. And they're adding smart materials, so you can have a bunch of knobs to push and pull some masks in Painter, so you could create a Rust creation node in Designer, hook it up in Painter, and then kind of paint a mask that kind of starts to just look like Rust automatically without even needing to do anything with a different brush. So they're kind of becoming really closely together and tied together. So it kind of depends on what you're making. But it's environment artists that work almost exclusively use Substance Designer for everything we need.
So you said that lighting was kind of the main thing. It's very important. A few questions about that. How does that process work in where you were working at? Did you have a whole team that did the lighting, or did everybody kind of work on it? And what program did you mainly use? Just Maya, or did you use different stuff, and how did it work? Since it's so key to everything.
Yeah. Every environment artist that works in light understands our lighting tools. But we do have a dedicated lighting team. It's very small. Our environment art team, I think, is about 11 people, 12 people maybe. And so 2 of them are dedicated lighters. But like, we need to work on lighting early on. There's not enough coverage for them. So every environment artist can like lay down the kind of values that we want and the kind of values that design needs to kind of navigate the player the way they want, and to kind of hit concept. And then the lighters will come in later and basically just like polish that, and they'll be in the loop of like of kind of like giving us direction. And so they're kind of key into just getting the look of they're responsible for the lighting across the entire game, but they might not necessarily do 100% of it. That makes sense. So like I'm not an amazing lighter, and I will never probably light a scene in the games we make, but I will help get us there by just the process of kind of working together and things like that. And then the second part was the tools we use. So we have a proprietary engine at work that we build everything in. And it's very similar to Unreal. And we use a 100% real-time lighting system. We don't do any baked lighting. We use a probe system for global illumination. So we capture like a ton of cube maps in our entire level, and then they're all driven. They create specular highlights, roughness information, and bounce lighting. So like that scene there, 100% real-time lighting, and our entire engine's like that. So. Any other questions?
Can you explain your process of applying to Crystal?
Mm-hmm. So I didn't really apply technically. They did a recruiting event, which is I've actually been on like the other side of it now for the past 2 years. They do it every year at GDC, and they reached out to Cogswell to send like 10 students there, and I was lucky enough to go. And I met. They usually have like a bunch of people from every discipline there to talk to the students, and I showed like my work, my portfolio to the like lead artist, a couple of other environment artists, the art director, and just like talked with them and got to meet them. And then I wasn't really looking for like a job. I was kind of looking for like an internship, which they didn't offer, but they were like willing to work with me to let me continue to like finish up my last remaining classes while working there. So like I took like long lunches to take a class, or like left a little bit early one day, a couple of days, and like they were willing to like balance it out for me, which was like super awesome and super lucky. But I didn't really have like an application or interview. They gave me an art test. It was like just make a tileable texture in ZBrush, and then it was like a full PBR texture, and after that they just gave me the job. So I had like an informal interview, I guess, at GDC. Any other questions? Any awesome work to show?
Matt, I have 2 general questions that I'd like to ask you.
Yeah, that's it.
First is I'm interested in how it's Square Enix, isn't it?
Square Enix owns Crystal Dynamics, yeah.
Yeah, okay. How do they, like, when they decide that certain assets, as far as the time it'll take, we better the contract out, how, do they have a really well orchestrated system where they actually like, okay, this asset will take this many hours, let's contract it out? How much time will it turn around and be? Like, how well do you guys really get that whole machine working where you figure out what's in-house and what's going to be out-of-house and how you orchestrate that?
So we have leads. We have like a leadership group. We have an environment art lead, and then we have like map leads, which are the leadership roles on the pillars that I was showing you guys. And they kind of like, they look at the scope of the work and like based off the concept, and they like very early on in the level building, they like figure out what assets they need and get reference, and like, and it's really just a giant drop zone of like, we want this asset, we want this asset. Generally what we outsource is like props. So like, the example here is like the kind of structure, like the modular parts and like the big large pieces that kind of make up the bones of the level, we build all in-house. We don't try to outsource like modular kits because they never work. But like all little props, like some of the set dressing stuff. A lot of the images that are on the board back there are on, like we're outsourced. Books, like the cardboard boxes, the backpack, the little like roll here, like all the little set dressing props. So we just collect a giant list with like reference. And then outsourcing, we have an outsource manager that kind of takes all that, organizes it, and then kind of balls it up into like very similar assets and like chunks. So it's like we have like maybe created like 10 outsourcing orders, and then he gets like a price cost on it, like a like sending out to different houses and be like, how much it's gonna cost. And then with that information, we'll be like, oh, we don't wanna spend that much money, so we'll start to like find a way to be cut and maybe like figure out what we can kind of reuse and things like that. And then from there, it goes, the outsourcing manager takes care of the rest. And then we'll give, depending on the style level, like for the cinematics team, I was like directly involved in the outsourcing feedback. Like every day I got emails and I handled all the feedback to get exactly what I needed for all the cinematics that I worked on. But for like larger levels, it's usually just like, it just comes back all at once and then just works in the game. And it just kind of depends on the area that you're working on. So. And then there's a second one.
Now, I have another question.
Yeah.
If a student has another question to ask.
I think there was a hand shooting on the back, but I got that.
Okay, get that person that doesn't feel bad.
There was kind of what you were talking about, it just struck me. Is the studio you worked at worked on one part of the game? And do you have, is there like different studios that work on different parts of the game? Or did your studio make the whole game? Or how does that?
So we actually partner with Eidos Montreal, who makes Deus Ex. They're like a giant studio. They actually have 2 full teams in-house. So part of their team, a much smaller part of the team, joined us in making areas for Rise of the Tomb Raider. And so that's like an interesting thing because they're like 3-hour time difference, and that's kind of like a constant juggling of like how to communicate with them. And then like outsourcing is a major part of game production. Like it's never 100% handled in-house unless maybe you're like Blizzard and have an endless amount of money, which most studios don't have a luxury of yet. And I have a lead, one of our lead is actually worked on made Diablo and was there for the entire process of Diablo, and they remade that game 3 times from scratch. Literally just came in one day, deleted the entire game, so we're gonna start over.
Oh.
That included the art design and nothing. They did that 3 times. So, yeah, unless you're Blizzard, you don't really get that luxury. Yeah, so outsourcing is a big part of it. Our animation pipeline was all handled by a third party. Like our cinematics animation, like we do this like facial rig capture thing at Digital Domain, where they actually we have real world actors like Camilla Levington, Laura, and she runs around in the stage with like this face rig thing on, and it captures her voice and facial animation that we actually put into the game onto the model right from the raw data. So like we have a lot of outsourced outside partners that help us. And on the previous game, TR9, the 2013 reboot, which I didn't work on, they actually outsourced like art for entire levels because they were actually a much smaller team. So they actually sent an entire level with one guy who was a Crystal employee in China with like 10 artists there and actually art an entire level based with his collection.
So you could outsource stuff to like China or even anywhere around the world, right?
Which is why like being really good at making models, just 3D models isn't really enough these days. You have to understand how to make awesome art. Like it's an overall process. It's everything. You can't outsource lighting really. You can't outsource like image quality, and like you can't outsource just the kind of overall mood and atmosphere, and that stuff's huge. So it's something I would recommend focusing on.
I was just curious, do you use the same render that your in-engine is using for cinematics, or
Yeah.
you have a slightly different version of the render for the cinematics?
We have some more features, but it's all based on the same engine. All of our cinematics are rendered in real time, with the exception of like 2 of them, which were recorded out videos for specific needs based on loading. We had to like do some background loading. But for the most part, because like Laura can change her costume whenever she wants, and so we want to support the player being able to see Laura's like to look like they want in every cinematic. So yeah, we use all the same tools and everything. We do have some more features. Our lighting system has like volumetric lighting, which we can use more of in the cinematics because it's a smaller condensed scene that doesn't need as many resources as the open game. We have real-time blurred lighting, like dithered lighting, which is super expensive to get soft lighting, a real-time soft light. So we can kind of blur some of the hard edges of the light. And then we have some different effects things we can throw in there. Like you can just kind of throw a lot more at the screen.
So do you approximately know the footage? How much cinematics produces for one game?
I think I was told in hours. I think we have like 3.5 hours of cinematics in Rise of the Tomb Raider.
All right, so you have more than a feature animated movie.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, there's also different ranges of cinematics. Like, we had a system of rating of cinematic importance. We had like A, B, and C. And then we also have something called IGC, which is like in-game cinematic. And so the in-game cinematics aren't handled by the cinematic team, they're handled by the level team. And it's like a small, like, 20-second or 30-second thing where it's just like, right in the environment, the camera just gets like taken over real quick, and it's like a quick little interaction of like pointing the player to the right direction. A lot of games do that. And then cinematics, an A quality cinematic had a lot more resources put into it. Every little tiny thing was like heavily scrutinized. Like every frame was like, oh no, this thing isn't working. And then like when you get down to the C range, it was just like, it was a cinematic that could be a little bit more underdeveloped. It was just had to be there for like continuity's sake. So like her apartment was like an A scene. We used it for one cinematic, and so I made her entire apartment, and it took me like 2 months, and then it ended up being used for the main menu of the game. Like later, it wasn't planned, and so like when you load up the game, this is like the screen that you see, which is kind of cool.
Right.
That's that.
I have a simple idea. Do you mind walking us through one of the videos?
Yeah, we could do like a cinematic.
Yeah.
Well, Crystal, we look at very flat structure. Like everybody's voice is like counted. So like, and when I got started there, I mean, they basically just like throw you into the fire and like see if you can handle it, for better or for worse. I think they really quickly find people that fit into, oh nice, the entire story. Oh, so there you go, all the cutscenes added together is about an hour.
What's gameplay context?
2 hours and 45 minutes, there you go. That's how long the cinematics are. Yeah, so like, I think it depends on the studio. Like I've heard studios that like juniors are very, very, like their hands are really held, where you're not like allowed to really do much of anything outside. You just get like, this is exactly what you're making. You're not really, or you're doing a lot of like optimization grunt work. But at Crystal, we're like, everybody does a little bit of everything. We're a very small team, like 11 environment artists isn't very many, especially when we made a giant, massive game. So like everybody's kind of like fit into like an area, and you kind of carve out a section for yourself. It's a lot of autonomy, which is works for some people. Like we had an artist that got hired, worked there for 6 months, and just wasn't a system that worked for him. It works well for me. So some studio, like you might work at a studio that just is not right for you at all, and you might work at a studio that's a great fit. And every studio is a little bit different. So one of the cinematics that I worked on is this intro snow scene. I was responsible for almost all of it, exceptional lighting. I didn't do much cinematic lighting.
So they have effects engine inside.
Yeah, it's nothing too robust. We do have Houdini support in the engine.
Oh, great.
For fixed camera simulations, so like we can. I can actually show you one of the scenes. Has anybody played the game by any chance?
I did, Matt.
Yeah.
I played the older
deluxe
version.
version just to
Did the one before that.
There's a couple scenes actually where we use Houdini where on a fixed camera to create like a really massive effect, which I can show you guys in a little bit. But overall, besides that, it's pretty standard, just kind of particle system. There's nothing really too robust. Our effects engine is actually a little bit further behind than our other rendering type. So this scene is this background mountain we use World Machine for. A lot of our like massive kind of background screen is done in World Machine, which is like a node-based editing. If you're comfortable in like Substance, it's really easy to pick up, and it's specifically designed to make terrain. It has like erosion parameters for like snow and rain and like river, and you kind of like carve out a very realistic, large swath of terrain very quickly.
Do you use it outside of cinematics at all, or just?
Yeah, almost all of our background terrain is done in World Machine.
Okay.
Even some of our levels, like we have these areas called hubs, which are like open exploration spaces that kind of all the game kind of ties together into. And so what the artist will do in the beginning is just make a cool looking terrain, and then like plop it down, and then find like a 100 meter by 100 meter space with that massive terrain chunk to kind of build the game into. That's kind of looks interesting.
And do you export it as a height map, or do you just like export the mesh for the terrain?
Yeah, we just export the mesh, and then bake any maps to it, like AO and all maps and things like that. We don't support height map terrain in our engine currently.
Okay.
I think it's a feature that is been requested many times. Yeah, so this all terrain back here, and then the foreground terrain is just like hand sculpted and ZBrush to get the kind of effect we want in like sun dressing.
Your engine supports fluid simulation, correct?
Yeah, kind of like Lara. I mean, it's not like exact simulation. It's kind of Lara just running around in like the water, and it like interacts with her probes.
And fire.
Fire not so much. We don't actually support like rigid body particles or like full like lit particles. We have like like I said, our physics or our effects stuff is a little further behind, with the exception of like Houdini. But Houdini doesn't really work in the game. It kind of works. It's used for like certain fixed camera things. And then that big mountain back there is like a matte painting, which we use a lot in cinematics, because you need to get like a kind of a certain look in there. And then I'll show you the terrain that we do. Someone's asking about it.
Matt, might I offer a critique of your cinematic stuff?
Yeah.
As I'm playing this game, it needs like 3,500 times more depth of field, because that's what makes a cinematic good.
Yeah.
It needs a lot more. I can see too much stuff.
Yeah.
So please talk to your art director about that and
Will do.
get back.
Don't get him
I'll send a
fired,
personal
please.
message. So yeah, this background terrain, I don't know if the player will actually look out there.
Hint, something bad's about to happen.
We won't watch it, but I'm just taking a look. So we'll go to the Syria tune. Oh, actually, we'll look at this is a fun scene. So this is Lara's apartment, her like obsession wall. So basically, like after the last game, she becomes like an introvert obsessive. And she builds this entire wall with this conspiracy theory. And so I got to build this entire like conspiracy theory wall, which is like super fun. But also like the camera goes like obsessively close to it, which is like a no-no for games usually. So like it was a lot of work of like meticulously like every little torn paper piece and like thumbtack and like wrinkle on the map, and this wall just for this like 30 seconds the camera staring at it was like a month of work.
Was the avalanche done in Houdini?
Yeah, so I'm gonna go there. Did she go back? I forget the order of the game. Shame on me. Oh yeah, right before here. Yeah, when she gets to the top of this thing, she gets chased down by an avalanche.
So this was mocapped, yeah?
This is actually gameplay. So this is actually done by hand by an animator, because the player can is actually swinging on the rope and using the joystick and the X button to axe onto the wall. And if anybody ever tells you to make ice in a game, be very careful. So it's coming up here. You should see like a giant avalanche. This is done with Houdini. This simulation. This is a fixed camera. It just like overlapped and composited into the game. And then it's gone now. It's like, and then from there it's just kind of traditional effects. And a similar thing with the Black Sea Prologue run out.
Matt, I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
My fondest memory of you is when you did my simulation to place rocks in your
Yeah.
cave. How do you,
So
you
this
have to
is-
use a lot of
this is Houdini,
procedural
right.
tools in your
So the water there.
actual placement of stuff?
Yeah, still actually, Substance Designer's actually kind of taken over that. So like we'll have like an atlas kit of rocks that we can just put into a texture. So like we're making a terrain texture and just like, hey, I want a rock, we have like a rock scatter node. And we're like, hey, scatter these rocks in top of my texture procedurally.
Nice.
So we just build we still use like a lot of traditional like ZBrush structure, like sculpting and ZBrush and building a lot of base structure in ZBrush, but then kind of adding details on top in Substance Designer.
So this rigid body simulation here is Houdini.
Yeah, it's all Houdini because it's fixed camera. It's baked and simmed in Houdini and then composited in the engine on like a plate that's always camera facing. And so we can like move the camera and resim it and remake it if we need to. And it creates a nice realistic water effect for the most part.
So Matt, you say that it's a still camera, but it's not. So like it doesn't
Well,
appear that it is?
The player can't control the camera, I guess I meant.
Okay.
Like an unplayer controlled camera.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess I should word that better. Because what if you give the player control, you can't do the Houdini stuff for like the certain kind of cinematics.
Right.
Yeah. Is there any other questions or any other?
I have a question kind of just about maybe your colleagues' portfolio and your portfolio. Do you just have, because I've seen both, like the polished piece, or do you have like examples of, say, your UV or the textures and everything alongside your polished piece in your portfolio?
You should always have breakdowns of the asset to show like underneath, under the hood. The most important is like the final image product, the result. But it's always good to have high polys information and wireframe and things like that. That's still something. It's becoming a little bit less important because like games, optimization in games is like it's much different. Like 10 years ago, you got like strict poly budgets that were like every asset was scrutinized for every polygon that was on it. But these days, like we just throw whatever polygons we need and have the scene and to make it look good. I mean, you don't want to be like super wasteful, but like honestly, like if we're making like a rock, like even the wall that she's like standing on, that like it's got all that silhouette detail on the edge, like that's super important. So like we just make it look awesome, and then we just kind of like with LEDs, we just aggressively LED everything, and it makes the movie more okay. Breakdowns are good.
So I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So this is particularly for Rise. Why was Geothermal Valley so taxing? Like, out of all the areas in the game, it just seemed to be the only area that just kind of chugged.
Well, fun story about Geothermal Valley. That level was in part of our VS1 of the entire production. So it was built before we knew so this is a transition into new hardware. It was built before we knew what the transition was, what the quality bar was for the new Xbox One, what we needed to do to make the game. We had no idea. So what happened was the map got overinflated. It was oh, we need this giant area, let's fill it with all this stuff. And so they closed VS1, which is when you just put down the level, and then you just go into the next vertical slice area. And so that just sat there being well, it's kind of done, it kind of works, but it was just a mess under the hood. And then Pretty much, yeah. And then you roll into like beta, which is when you kind of start re-looking at the old content, and then it was just like an oh shit moment. And so that whole level had to be like rebuilt within like 2 months. The optimization kind of struggled, like it wasn't built well for optimization. Like part of optimization is designing your levels smart. When you're streaming, you want to kind of create pockets that you can just turn off completely. And geothermal valley is just a hole, and there's no included areas that we can do that. And so yeah, it's just bad planning. I wish I could tell you a better story than that. Game developers, that's what it is. Like, we suck at our job sometimes. Like, ideally, we've all shipped, like everybody at the studio shipped multiple games, and you just see all these things coming. But like, really, like game development is just like, it's just like a bunch of people trying to figure out how to make a game. It's ridiculous.
Matt, I have a soft skills question.
Yeah.
Can you talk briefly to the students about some mistakes you made or things you did that when you were working part-time, doing contract work and taking classes and managing which classes to spend time on, and those sorts of issues?
Yeah. So like in the early slide, I had a contract art job for like 8 months before I started working at Crystal. And so I took full-time classes during that, so I was like working like 10, 15 hours a week on that. It's definitely difficult because your classwork like suffers. Like you want to do like a project that you could have done, and you know you could have done it if you weren't working. On the side, though, like I learned a lot from doing that. Like I think the transition into like making production art is like very jarring. It's like there's certain things you have a certain amount of time to make a certain thing, and like you have to understand like how to cut things and like every detail. Like when I worked as a student, like every little pixel and every little edge mattered to me, which is like not a good idea. I wouldn't recommend overly obsessing about every pixel. But I think working at Massive Black helped me transition into my job better because, like I said, I got thrown into the fire. I made one asset the first week with a guy I got hired with, and so the first week I just made like this asset to learn the engine and get an asset in. And after that, I got thrown into a level to make terrain, and I never made terrain in my life really. So like it's like, oh, here you go, this is your task and figure it out. I was like, okay. But I think working in like doing contract work helped me, and I think the guy I got hired with, he was straight out of school, and didn't do like an internship or anything, and it took him like a couple more months to kind of get used to it. So if you get an opportunity to work on some like contract work that's like for a significant company, I'd just be careful. Like just be careful, make sure that you're going to learn something from it, and then make sure it's something that it's helping you out and not hurting your overall education to get to where you want to go.
Matt, I have another mildly patronizing and somewhat leading question for you.
Can't wait.
What percentage of the people that you work with, artists and such, when the art director comes by to give feedback on something change, just kind of listen to it and have only maybe 30% of it implemented by the next time they talk to him? Don't write down anything that he said to change.
Yeah. Is that the question?
But for you, what percentage of people, like, is it 80% of people do it that way at the company you work at, 95%, or?
I think we have a pretty amazing art team, I would say. If you look at our game, I would say that like companies that have twice the amount of artists that wouldn't be able to pull off some of the stuff we did. And we built this game in 2 years, switching a console generation. Didn't have our lighting pipeline or material pipeline on until halfway through production. It was a mess. But somehow we managed with like just the sole our team. Honestly, is just like super amazing. So I can't bash anybody in the art team. And our art director was this super cool guy. He's like incredibly talented, and like I said, we have like an open structure. So like if your art director comes, like if you get art director feedback, you can question it and be like, I think that's bad. Like I think that's a bad call. Well, not, you might not win, but like, it's not frowned upon, just be like, I think this is a stupid call, like, I can do this better, and like, I can, like, it's super open, which I think makes a better product instead of being like, here's what I want by tomorrow. You do get tests like that, like, especially towards the end, like, of closing out a level where it's like, this rock is floating, or like, this thing is popping here, or like, or we need to like adjust this terrain slightly to do this. It's like, so you get more like tests like that towards the end, but when the art direction is actually like drilling down on it, it's much more open. So, nobody's dropping the ball, I don't think.
Are you aiming for a PR position, Matt?
No. But no, I mean, honestly, like, I've got nothing bad to say about their team. We do magic, so.
All right,
Yeah.
all right. So do we want to have one-on-one? Somebody would like to show the level?
Wants to show me cool stuff?
Matt? Yeah,
Some cool stuff?
all right.
Yeah. Well, let's start.
Give him a hand before that.
I'll leave these slides, I'll just copy them over.